The honourable member for Morris.
Mr. Speaker, just when you thought the NDP couldn't sink any lower, they're clawing back funding from 122 not-for-profit agencies, they decide to blame a civil servant. In this case, we are told that this staff person made a mistake and, I quote, did not understand how the process worked, end quote. Mr. Speaker, this career civil servant said in their email to the affected agencies, and I quote, I have been directed, end quote, in reference to the clawback. Is the Premier now saying that there was no direction, that this staffer just simply woke up on November 28th and on their own decided to send an email to the affected agencies asking for the clawback?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. Of course, the premise of his question is entirely incorrect. As the Premier has just clarified, there was no clawback. In fact, we continue to support community agencies because we believe in community agencies. We want to make sure that community is connected with other organizations so that we can continue to enhance the quality of life for every Manitoban. Contrast that, Mr. Speaker, with the Leader of the Opposition. He wants to cut $500 million from the budget. That won't do anybody any good anywhere in Manitoba.
The honourable member for Morris.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister and the Premier are falsely claiming that only 5 agencies received the clawback request. In the FIPA response, I asked for a copy of the correspondence sent to affected agencies. I was advised it would take 35 and a half hours at a cost over $1,000, and I'll table that estimate of cost. Is the Premier suggesting to the Legislature that receiving 5 pieces of correspondence, as he claims, requires a payment of over $1,000 in a week's worth of work?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I want to indicate to the member opposite, because this is a very important question, that the premise of his question is entirely wrong. There was no clawback of funds, and in fact, we continue to invest in community organizations and community agencies in order to improve the welfare and well-being of all of our communities, not only here in Manitoba, but not only here in Winnipeg, but across Manitoba. Now, the member opposite has been a part of an opposition that has one goal and one goal only, and that's to cut $500 million from the budget. And as I said in the last question, Mr. Speaker, that won't do anybody any good anywhere in Manitoba.
The honourable member for Morris.
Mr. Speaker, according to the FIPA response, in reference to the clawback request, and I quote, the total number of service providers that responded was 122, end quote. Could the Premier explain how, if only 5 not-for-profits, as he claimed, received the request, that 122 actually responded to the request? Or would the Premier like to use this opportunity to stand in the House and correct the record for putting misleading information on the record?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
You know, Mr. Speaker, this is a government that proposed a budget that's focused on jobs for Manitobans and opportunities for young people. And part of that equation, Mr. Speaker, is investing in community organizations and community agencies to make sure that we have healthy neighborhoods and healthy communities. The members opposite have voted against everything we've put on the table to invest in communities. They voted against investments in social services agencies. They voted against neighborhoods, and they voted against the people who live in those neighborhoods, Mr. Speaker. The biggest threat to community organizations in this province is the Leader of the Opposition and every member of his caucus.